Welcome to the Underwater Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of underwater portrait photography, cinematography, and everything in between. With me, your host, Brett Stanley. Welcome back to the Underwater Podcast, and this week, my guest is underwater DP Vance Burberry. Vance has had an amazing career, starting as a lighting designer for Australian rock bands and now working as a sought-after underwater DP in America. He's got some great stories about using film, his experiences chasing submarines for the latest Bad Bunny music video, and how rolling film around an edit suite can give you some crazy special effects. Just before we jump in, I need to apologise for the quality of this week's episode, as I did a total rookie mistake and forgot to check my microphone before we started rolling. And so the whole interview is recorded with my laptop microphone, making it a bit crap. So yeah, sorry. Okay, let's dive in. Vance, welcome to the Underwater Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Brett. It's kind of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have you on here. I mean, I've kind of known you from the industry and around LA, and we've chatted a few times, but it's awesome to kind of get time to dig into your kind of background, because you've had an interesting career working from, you know, film and TV and commercials, but also a lot of like music videos and stuff as well.
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting road, I got to say. It was an unexpected one, and I just followed my nose and wound up here and still going happily.
Oh, that's great. So talk us through that. How did this all start for you?
Long, complicated conversation that's not probably for this place, but I ended up being on my own at 14 years old in Australia, in Sydney. I was born in England but moved to Australia when I was like 9 years old.
Oh, right.
So I was on my own, got a job working in theatre, like as a gopher, and then kind of landed up getting involved in the lighting side.
Yeah.
That sort of led to me starting doing lights for bands in pubs in Australia. That went on, I kind of grew, and I landed up working for an Australian band called Cold Chisel as their lighting designer, The Angels, Swanee, which was another thing, and then I landed up working with In Excess as their touring lighting designer.
So just some small bands in Australia.
Yeah, little bands. And then I came to America on what turned out to be the Second World Tour with them. We did a bunch of shows opening for the Go-Go's, and the day before I was supposed to fly back to Australia, I got a call from Tom Kippett, the tour manager of the Go-Go's, saying that they'd fired their LD and would I like to come and take over the tour, which I did. And I stayed, and I ended up staying, doing some tours with light and sound designers, lighting tech and crew chief and things like that. And then I kind of went up the road for a while, and I got a job at SIR, which was Studio Instrument Rentals. They had a stage at that time where the Technicolor building is now at Sunset Gower Studios. And they wanted to build a concert lighting system. So I kind of put that together with them, with light and sound design. And just one day I'm on the stage, and I think I believe it was James Taylor was doing a music video on stage 3, and they were going, we need a lighting electrician. Could you come and, do you know anyone? I said, well, I know lighting, it's just lights, so yeah, movie lights are a little different. I landed up working as an electrician. Yeah. Very quickly I moved up, and mainly because I was my concert lighting design background. At that time, heavy metal was kind of blowing up. This is around probably 1985, 86. And nobody in rock and roll knew about truss, concert lighting or anything, so I ended up designing and building these lighting systems for music videos, you know. Janet Jackson's Control and a whole bunch of stuff. So pretty soon I became a DP. I worked for this director as a gaffer named Nigel Dick, and I bugged him like crazy to let me shoot for him. And finally he let me operate on Welcome to the Jungle for Guns N' Roses, which I was also gaffed and lit. Yeah. And after that, he let me shoot something for them. It was the first thing I think was called something for an artist named Angela Wimbush, R&B artist. And then I did a video for Was Not Was called Walk the Dinosaur with Don Was, music, the well-known music producer. And after that, I shot Sweet Child of Mine for Guns N' Roses, and that kind of blew everything up from there. So
Yeah.
it was kind of an interesting road.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way to get there from lighting through to DPing. That's really
Well, the job is lighting after all, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're just capturing the light, and you're
Yeah.
basically manipulating the light in different ways.
yeah.
Does that, and not to derail your story, we'll come back to it, but has lighting sort of given you a good perspective on what can be done, like with your background in lighting design?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, for me, I pull from, theater definitely has its approach, and concert lighting has its approach, and cinema has its approach. And so just sort of bringing all those elements together in what I do has been something that I've always done, and I really enjoy it. And, there's a lot of old theater techniques that can be applied in the film world. And, light to me is the heart of everything anyway.
Yeah.
So without it, your images have no soul without. And that's actually some of the things I've loved about your work is the way you've not only captured beautiful images, but the way you've used light and the way the light interacts in your images. So I think there's a lot of value to that. And I think that really emotionally connects a viewer to the images they're seeing or the story that's being told. You really need to draw people into the world and get them immersed almost on a subconscious level. And I think light and shadow really does that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in the color of the light, the temperature, and the direction that it's coming from can change a scene so dramatically.
Yeah, in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah. And I remember when I was starting, the first time I sort of took a light and pushed it way off to the side and just went, oh my God, this is totally different. Started to shape things. It gave like a 3D kind of look.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really, the position of a light can make just such a huge difference. And there's an old standard sort of photography approach for lighting where you light a sphere, light a cube, light a cone, and really those three shapes are really what everything is sort of built from. So once you get that foundation, it really allows you to understand how light affects something by the way it's positioned. It's really cool.
Yeah. And so I just totally derailed you.
Derail away. I mean, these conversations to me are always a journey, and one thing leads to the other. I'm like, for me, this is the heart of it. Has always been the heart of it for me. The emotional connection between light and an audience has always been everything to me. So, I mean, I think that's the heart of a conversation anyway, in many ways.
So, in terms of lighting, so when you've gone underwater, because you're now doing a lot of underwater stuff as well as your land-based.
Yeah. How
does the lighting setup kind of change once you get down there?
You need a lot more of it. That's probably the first thing is like, once light hits water, it actually, obviously it slows down, and it also, the speed of light reduces once it goes through water, and due to refraction, it also scatters. So even though the shape of light doesn't change, the amount and the way you control it does change. So it's a combination of you're putting light above the water, you're using lights under the water. But I still like to take the same creative approach to it light-wise. You're still getting the same feeling, so you get the same sort of emotional feeling, but obviously the light responds in a different way, and that's really how it changes. It's also, a lot more painstaking and time-consuming working underwater, as you know. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How do you deal with color underwater? Like, because being a lighting designer, I assume you have a lot of feelings about color, and a lot of colors don't work underwater as well as they do above. What's your kind of approach to that?
Well, obviously, I'd like to stay either cool or warm. Again, it's sort of, for me, it's a job by job approach. I mean, the use of color, I things that I don't find work well. Maybe yellows tend to not work so well. Reds can turn a little magenta if you're not careful, so you have to be really saturated on those colors. But again, it's really a lot of it is about, again, just creating that mood as opposed to getting, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that I don't really, I'm very much about being in the moment. I have an approach, but it is very much about being in the moment and seeing what inspires me in the moment with, with what I'm lighting. It's interesting. Right. Certainly there is design and there's preparation. I understand what light I'm using and I sort of have a color range in mind. But a lot of the time I'll put something in, I'll look at it and go, that doesn't work, and I'll change it. Yeah. Within that sort of, that preparation that I've done.
Absolutely. And so a lot of the work you're doing, is it driven by you? Like, are you kind of designing a lot of this, or is it quite kind of directed by the director and by the production?
It varies. I mean, certainly once you get underwater, the way the camera moves, you've had a discussion with the director, but the way the camera moves and the way the light looks I have a pretty big say in it, because it's interesting that unless they've done underwater work before, they really do not understand the limitations or, how optics change or how the light changes. So they kind of look to you to lead a little bit, but at the same time, you're trying to give them, what they actually need as creatively. So it's kind of a collaboration, like as it should be, obviously, in the film industry. We got a bunch of people working together. So I think at the end of the day, it is a collaboration, and I say yes or no, depending on what they're asking for, whether it works or not in the underwater environment.
Yeah, whether it's actually feasible or whether you can pull it off with the resources you have.
Yeah, exactly. There's never enough time. That's usually the big one. It's like they never really allow enough time unless they have a lot of experience in underwater work,
Right. So what would you say is the least amount of time you've had to pull something off? Have you had to do some MacGyver sort of stuff to get things to happen?
Oh God, yes. I mean, literally, I've had a couple of hours to do something which really I need half a day for. And you're not, at the end of the day, you're not probably super happy with the way it turns out, because you're basically just scrambling. But yeah, you get it done, and you get it done proficiently, and you figure it out. But specifically, God, it's just time, really. It really is time and the amount of coverage you can get in the amount of time you have. So in those situations, I tend to, like lighting-wise, I try and keep it really simple. If I can just put one light above in the right place without having to put lights underwater, I'll do that, just to get something cool on film or digital. Sorry. Yeah. I'm an old film guy. I can't help it.
No. I mean, that's kind of what you came up through, right? So, like, digital would have been, like, in the second half of your career.
Yeah, it is. Well, more than that. I mean, until the Alexa came along, I refused to shoot digital.
Right.
I wouldn't. Yeah. I wouldn't do it. They were just. It was so harsh compared to film, and didn't have that depth and luster that film had. So it was definitely, I definitely pushed back hard for a long time. And even when the Alexa came along, I still, if I had any choice, I'd always go film. So
right. Yeah.
Even though I have to say underwater, I just did a project for Bad Bunny when I had 5 days of underwater work, shooting 35 millimeter film. And I got to say, in that environment, it's much more practical and efficient to work digitally than it is to work on film, going through all that. So
I wanted to ask you about that project, actually, because it looked really interesting, and the creative decision to use film. I wanted to see if there was a reason behind that, because it's very action orientated.
Yeah, it is. Certainly the director and cinematographer, the land. I only was in charge of the underwater work on that job.
Yeah.
So they wanted to shoot film, and so I'm like, fine. Went to Hydroflex, used their deep water housing, and a lot of it was like explaining to them, underwater optics and how they work differently to on land and so on and so forth. But Chris, the DP, Chris Ripley, he was very, very cool and collaborative. So we were actually able to work very well together, and he understood the problems and adapted accordingly. So it was a very fun, if not challenging project, especially the ocean work.
Yeah. I saw some of the BTS that you posted on that, and there's like I think you were chasing some jet skis and you're being dragged on a jet ski yourself with this massive film camera.
Well, actually, I wasn't dragged, but I had a rescue board, and I had jet skis blasting by me at high speed, and literally, I think there's a shot in there made in the video where literally they're about 2 feet either side of me. They go right by me and then blow water over the camera. We did a lot of work on the surface with that. And that's pretty challenging. But again, I had an amazing Marine coordinator, and Matt O'Connor, who he actually was the Marine coordinator on the latest Avatar films. So working with him in the water was really, really helpful, because we were able to, sink a buoy and actually use that as our reference position, so we could always get back to it. Also, there was some current, so it held us in position to avoid drift, so that when these jet skis came by real close, I wasn't going to drift in front of them or drift out of position to create a dangerous situation. So that was a lot of fun, for sure. And then you saw there was the submarine setup, which we shot out in Catalina.
Yeah, that looked crazy, because they were like new, like personal submarines, right? Like they're just like glass acrylic spheres with motors attached to them, basically.
Yeah, they are. And, you had getting that to position. Again, we had to get a reference position. We're only about 15, 20 feet deep with that. But trying to get the right position on that was pretty challenging. We did have it rigged out at one point with speed rail, which was painted out in post, where I actually rigged the cameras. They were extended pretty far out, forward and aft. I had the 35mm film camera at the front, and then put a Blackmagic 4K at the back that we were actually rigged. So I dropped down, rig the camera, focus the cameras, roll the cameras, and move away. And then there was stuff in the water where I'm just with the 35mm film camera, just cruising around, picking off shots with the submarine. But it was a slow process, for sure. Right. It took a lot of time to get those few shots.
So with those shots, is it the talent driving the subs as well?
No, there is actually, if you look, there is 2 people in that submarine. So there is somebody else controlling the submarine.
Right. So there's a pilot.
Yeah, there is a pilot. Yeah.
Yeah. So with a situation like that, how are you communicating with everybody? How are you kind of getting them to go back and restart? And that just sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, they had control on the surface. They were taught. They had radio communication to the submarine on the surface. Unfortunately they had no video assist, because with a submarine floating around under there, I'm not going to have a cable flying around. So literally we'd shoot one pass, I'd pop to the surface, there'd be a support boat right by me, I'd talk to them, they'd communicate to the submarine, I'd drop back down. It was a lot of hard work, physically really demanding. And, I'm popping up and down, literally only from 20 feet, but still, you're popping up and down all day and you're spending a lot of time under the water. It was definitely physically challenging.
How long did you end up doing those shots for?
That was a full day out at Catalina, yeah.
Wow, yeah. Which is amazing, because I've seen that music video and it looks amazing, but it's almost 10 seconds worth of stuff.
Yep.
It's so much work for such a small amount of footage.
Yeah.
That ends up in the edit.
And that's, working in the ocean is especially challenging, as you know. So getting all those elements to coordinate at once and just to pull up those few shots is quite the challenge. And we shot a lot more than was actually in the video, but even so, it's still pretty challenging. And that's kind of how the water world works. To get those few shots, you can take a lot of time under the water. So and like I said, it's especially challenging in the ocean. So
yeah.
Once you're in a pool, like the later stuff in that room, that was with the girl in the water, and then when they sunk the room, that was a lot easier to deal with, obviously, because you're in a very controlled environment.
Absolutely, yeah. And I wanted to ask you about that room too, because I saw Acton, I think it was Rob,
Yep.
posting some BTS of that rigging of that room, and that looked incredible as well, just the mechanics behind that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a construction crane and then a truss support system with chain motors in place that allowed it to raise and lower. TJ White, the stunt coordinator, really was designed a lot of the engineering behind that and
Right.
how it was supported. Once it was in place, the rig was actually supported by the truss system that was supporting the room and the chain motors. But at the same time, the construction crane was kept in place with tension to avoid, if anything breaks, you've got basically a great big safety, so nobody gets hurt, because we're under that, and the doors are actually on either side. So when I'm shooting that stuff in the room, I'm pretty much got jammed up against the wall of the tank or the pool. So it was really tight in there. So if anything had broken or shifted, the chances of getting hurt were pretty high. So a lot of safety precautions were put in place. And, TJ I've worked with for years, and he's like one of the safest guys I know. I mean, that guy is so safe, and I never have to worry when I'm on a set with that guy. So it was a pretty fun experience overall.
I mean, the footage that you got from that, and even in that room, because it's basically a big silver metal room, which I think is it slowly filling up, or is it ends up being filled?
They started with about 6 inches of water, so we get a little bit of water in the bottom, and then half full, and then they sunk it with some room at the top, so the artist could be up at the top, and then he'd drop down and perform. They'd run lighting, we'd roll camera on that, and he kept repeating that. He was pretty good, actually. It wasn't I hate to say it, I forget the guy's name. It wasn't Bad Bunny. It was the other artist in the video that did all the underwater stuff. He was really cool. He's a very sweet guy and was really all over it as far as getting underwater. He had no issues at all, So that was pretty good. That sometimes comes up when you're putting people in the water. They put people that aren't very water confident in, and then it becomes highly problematic. But with him, it was great. So
yeah, I was going to ask, because he did seem very comfortable in there. I wasn't sure if he was a stunty or if he was the actual artist himself.
No, that was the actual artist, and he was very comfortable, had no issues in the water whatsoever, which was great.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, and I kind of touched on it before, was when you do a job like this and you've got so much amazing footage, and then you see the final edit where it's, of each one of these setups, there's maybe 10, 15 seconds worth. How do you reconcile that with yourself in terms of going, there was so much awesomeness, but it never's going to get to see the light of day?
Yeah, you know what? I get it. And, after 34 years of doing this and being disappointed, not only underwater, but on land, of things that don't make it, you're kind of like, oh, well, what's in there was cool. And then you get a surprise. Like if you look at my site, there's an intel spot where I didn't spend that much time underwater relatively to the overall spot, but I was beautifully surprised that about 80% of the spot was all the water work. So you get those surprises as well.
Right. Yeah.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, totally.
You're either screwed or you get to see the stuff you want to see. So.
Do you get much latitude to do any stuff with the outtakes later, like for your social media or for your reel?
Not really, because they own that stuff. It's pretty hard to get. My wife has a production company, so we do keep masters here of all the raw footage from these jobs that we do. So occasionally, and I shoot a lot for my wife's company, and there's times when I can pull stuff, and as long as we get permission from our clients, I'm able to pull stuff. But mostly it's usually I'm just pulling from the final piece, and I don't get to have any of that cool stuff that I wish I had, unfortunately.
Yeah, totally. And are you putting a reel together every year, or do you need a reel these days? Like, how are you kind of advertising yourself to get more work? Is it just from the work you've done previously?
A lot of it's word of mouth. People know me. I've been around a long time. So you get a lot of that. I have a website, vanceburberry.com, and I put stuff on there, and I update that. My wife's production company has a site called Simian, which is very similar to Wiredrive, where all my work, as soon as I get it, is encoded and put up onto that website. That's also actually where all my material on my website links to. But I can go on there at any time. I have everything I've done in the last probably 10 years is up on that website. Agent will call, we got a job featuring blah, 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 this particular type of work. Can you put together a reel for me? I can literally go into the website, Simeon, go to build a reel in 10 minutes with a reel, and I'll move it around and get it how I want it. I just literally drag and drop clips into the reel column.
Yeah.
And then I send the link to my agent, and that link goes out.
So you just go. So this is like a library of all the stuff you've shot,
correct.
And then you can just go in there, and they've got a tool where you can basically do a quick edit and piece stuff together, and then just send that out. That's amazing.
It's just drag and drop, and it really does. It really does help a lot, because more and more these days, quick story. Many years ago, I was up for a dog food commercial that was shooting in Maine. And the agency was like, well, we need someone that shot a dog food commercial in Maine before. Of course, good luck finding that guy. So, I didn't get the job, but, they get so specific. They want to see specifically, they want to see for a certain project. So once you understand what those boards are and what that project's involved, you try and shape a reel to have as much content with that kind of work in it, whether it's a white site job or a green screen job, or it's a water job with synchronized swimmers, or it's whatever it may be. You try and build that reel to really specifically target what they're looking for.
And I would say that would make you stand out from the rest as well, because you've given them exactly what they're after. You're not giving them your 2020 reel, which has all sorts of stuff in there.
Exactly. I mean,
it's really targeted.
It's really targeted, and I think that's the way you have to. That's definitely the way you have to do it now. You have to be really targeted. So, like I shoot a lot of concert films, so I have a concert film comes out. If I've got a multicam concert film, then I'll build a reel of pieces from all these multicam concert films, etc.
Yeah. So that site that you're using, is that something that is available to the public?
Yeah.
Can anyone use that?
Anyone can use that. It's Simeon. It's called Simeon, and you can sign up, and I forget what it's not that expensive.
Okay.
I think pays rent $300 a month, I think, but that's for we got like huge storage. There's different plans, so for an individual, there's much cheaper plans that they can put their work on and build this. I think it's a great tool. It's a little cheaper than Wiredrive, which does the same thing. And they've been a great company. We've been with them probably 10 years, I guess.
Is this what you're using to basically send the final footage to the client as well? Is it that what it's for, or is it?
Well, I can do whatever. What's nice about it, you can just create a quick link, and you can send out that quick link. With that, you get it'll follow that link, and you'll get tracking information. You can see where it was viewed, how many people viewed it, how deep into the reel they got, how many clips in the reel they got. So you can kind of get a sense of, if you see them there in and out of it in a minute or so, you're probably not going to get it. The deeper it goes, the more chance you're going to get you're probably going to get the job.
Yeah. So if they've watched the whole thing, they're somewhat interested.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really important when you're building those reels is how you put them together. Is you want to hit them hard. With the internet these days, people's attention spans are really short. If they don't see what they're looking for in the first 30 seconds, they're not going to go any further. So it's really important that you shape your reel really well and really target what you're going after and show the very best work you have first to get their attention.
Yeah. You don't want to start off with you don't want to ease them into it. You want to.
Yeah, you got to hit them hard and fast.
Yeah. So coming from a photography point of view, as I've always through this career, and you got to put a portfolio together and to try and get commercial work and stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, it's good work to start with and good work to end with. Is it the same with a reel like that, or are you kind of just trying to put all the best stuff at the beginning?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, for me, because it's motion, and because they're actually going to view clip by clip, I get always the best stuff first.
Yeah.
And I don't go out with a bang, because 95% of the time nobody ever watches it all the way through.
And how long would an average reel like this be?
It depends on what it is. Commercials usually are 30, 60 seconds. If it's a music video, it'll be a 1 to 1 minute, 20-second clip. If it's a concert film, same thing. So you don't want to be any longer than that. People's attention span is just not there. You don't want to put whole videos on there unless there's a really specific reason to do so. Otherwise, you give them a minute 20 out of it,
exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And commercials are 30s and 60s, so you can just throw those on. It's the music work or doc work or other stuff that you're doing where you have to kind of cut them down, which I do prior. Everything I load up, if it's long and I want to cut it down, I cut it down before it goes up. I don't put the whole thing up.
Right. Okay. And the other thing that we've spoken about, and I know you do teach this stuff, is colouring and grading underwater footage.
Yeah.
Is that just something you got into out of necessity, or was it just something that you wanted to do?
I kind of wanted to do it. Number one is, I've spent 34 years as a DP. In 34 years, I've shot, I would have to say many, many, many thousands of hours sitting in color bays with, some of the best colorists in the country. David Hussey at Company 3, Stefan Sonnefeld, Bo Leone, Marshall Plant, who's my current colorist. These guys are really amazing at what they do, and certainly you learn by that. You sort of see what they do. Over the last 5 or 6 years since I've really got into colors, really only become accessible to us normal folks to do at home in the last 10 years. And only now I think it's becoming prevalent now that, Blackmagic have brought out their mini panels and, the development of DaVinci Resolve software and you're now able to actually color at home. And, learning the software is part of it. I've been at it for like 6 years now. Learning the software is one part of it, but that's, in a way, is the small part of it. Learning how to use the software and how to build the right node sequences, how to achieve certain looks, how to go about achieving certain looks. It's an ongoing learning process. And I'm continually learning. And fortunately, my professional colorist, Marshall, is also a close friend of mine, and he teaches me a lot. Pretty much every time I go in with a session with him, he's teaching me about node structure and how he approaches certain things, and because everything's a little different. So learning that from a guy like that has been so incredibly helpful and made me a better colorist. And for me, I think for me it was a lot of jobs. You used to go in the film days, you used to grade everything. Like you'd take the film in, all the footage you shot would be graded. It wasn't 9 times out of 10. It wasn't done later on. They grade everything, and then it goes into editorial. Because they're not going to be cutting on film, and a lot of the time they're not going to just cut off dailies. They want to cut on final look. So you would always get invited to color. These days, you do not always get invited to color. In fact, nowhere near like you used to. Certainly long-form projects like concert films and things like that, for sure. But commercials, not very often. So when I do get the opportunity to do that, I go for it. But otherwise, what I'll try and do is, if I'm shooting a job, I'll have a couple of clips pulled and put on a drive that I'll take home after day one or after the job, and I'll go into my bay and I'll grade them how I want the stuff to look, and to send that to the client so they have some sort of reference for their final telecine. And a lot of the time they go for it, or they get pretty close to it, which is really helpful. So really it's being able to control the look of the work you've done, especially you've shot it to look a certain way, and it will come back. I'm like, that's not the way I shot this or what I intended.
Yeah.
And it's kind of wrong that they don't do that. This is a thing that in Europe it's not that way, but here for some reason they take it away, it's done, you have really no say. And that's pretty frustrating because to me, printing or grading, that's the second part of your job. Your job is not complete until you've been involved with the color grade. So
absolutely.
So having a grading suite in my house has allowed me to at least be able to say, okay, guys, this is what I'm thinking. Here you go. So it does allow a lot of work to land up looking how you wanted it to look.
Yeah, and a lot of times I find with those sorts of things, especially with client work, is if they don't have any idea what you were after, then they don't know where to start, and they can start anywhere.
Yep.
But if you give them a little bit of input, like you say, like you give them a grade, then at least you've put that in their minds and they know, oh, okay, well, he's probably shot this to be around this area.
Correct.
Yeah.
Growing up in film, there's sort of a trend these days that it's, we're going to do it all in the grade. They do things in the grade. And my colorist complains all the time. It's like he said, no three, you have 5 scenes and nothing matches.
Right.
Growing up in film, you couldn't get away with that. And color correction wasn't what it was. If you didn't do it right in camera, they weren't going to do it on the back end. So still to this day, to me, to light and shoot in camera how you want it to be is really important. So when your colorist should be able to see that, like Marshall, I can send it to my colorist Marshall and say, hey man, just take a look at this and blah, 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 and he'll know exactly what I was going for. Again, we've worked together for 15 years, so that does help.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit. When I can get my guy on it, yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that you say, that the colouring and the grading is the second half of the job, because for me, coming from a photography standpoint, like I'm shooting as flat an image as I can so that I've got as much to work with in post-production. And a lot of my clients don't get that. They're like, can we just have the unedited images? And I'm like, well, no, because they're crap. It's not until you get in there and that's when the sculpture comes out of the rock, is when you do the grading and the colouring. And so for me now, getting into more film stuff, and I'm starting to get into Resolve and DaVinci and trying to do that same kind of thing, it's so frustrating because I'm so good at like Photoshop, but when it comes to DaVinci, it's a whole new world, and it does my head in because I've got to start from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, it is a whole new world for sure. Obviously, you're dealing with a moving image, and a lot of the times changing light through that image. So it is a different beast. I mean, I suck at Photoshop, but I know Lightroom really, really well, and I'm happy to see that the latest version of Lightroom actually has color wheels in it.
Yeah, it does.
Which makes it a little simple. And a lot of the time, I'll end up bringing stills into Resolve and grading in Resolve because I know it so much better, But like you say, you're starting with a flat image. And, when I shot film, and I still shoot film when I can, you always want to have for color grading, you always wanted a fat negative. Goes back to the old saying of expose for the shadows, print for the highlights. And you do want as much information in there. I mean, in the 90s when I was just shooting a lot of those big hip-hop videos for Hype Williams, like, I don't know, Look Where Your Eyes Can't See with Busta Rhymes, and, LL Cool J's Phenomenon and things like that. We were overexposing 2.5 to 3 stops on all that stuff. You were getting a very flat negative, but obviously with a dynamic range of film, you could do that. So when you brought it in and you wanted really crisp, crunchy blacks and nice contrast and clean roll off in the highlights, that allowed you to get that in post.
Right.
As opposed to if you were doing optical printing, you wouldn't do that. It'd be a little different, but you'd still probably have a fat negative, but maybe it's a stop as opposed to a stop, as opposed to 2.5 and 3. So, optical printing and electronic color correction were definitely two different animals. And I still apply a lot of that today when I'm shooting for digital. I do not underexpose digital unless I intend it to be dark and stay dark. If you try and lift stuff up, and I see people complaining on all these different user sites, Blackmagic for one, where they say, "Oh, I got so much noise." Well, you've underexposed it, and that's what happens. With film, you would add grain. With digital, you add noise. It's you really got to be smart about the way you expose. Now, understand where you're going to go on the backside to make sure you expose things in the correct way,
right,
to give you the maximum range. And this, you just said that's what you need to do, and you're right. It applies across both mediums for sure.
And there's an interesting thing too with digital, where you have a lot of people getting into film, into cinema, don't understand this, is that you have a native ISO for your camera.
Correct.
So you have an ISO that it is specifically made for, and then any ISO above or below that is just pushing or pulling it up or down.
Correct.
So if you're not shooting in those native formats, you're going to get noise on either side of it.
Correct. If you're overexposed, if you're pushing 800 to 1600, all you're doing is adding gain. You're not changing the native ISO, unless obviously some of the newer cameras have dual native ISOs. But I always shoot at native ISO.
Yeah,
I never go outside of it.
I think that's what I learned from you when I saw you at Hollywood Divers recently, and I was renting the Blackmagic 4K because it has a native of, I think it's 400 to 3200.
Correct.
And for me as a photographer, 3200 is crazy going that high up in the ISO. Yeah. But I shot the project on it, and it was amazing. It was so crisp and so little noise. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, it's native ISO, stick with it. And people complain. You realize that I shot film at 500 ASA, 100 ASA, 250 ASA, 50 ASA. 500 was the max ever. And, I was able to create beautiful images. So complaining about 800, having a native 800 ISO, I'm sorry, is a little silly. It's a different world out there. I mean, there's a lot of young guys out there doing a lot of really interesting experimental stuff. That's great. I never want to be the old guy, when I was a lad, we used to light stuff with glowworms,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But what I do love trying to innovate, trying to approach things from a different way, latching on to these new techniques, and I think it's really, really cool. But I still believe that you still need to understand the real fundamentals of image capture, whether it be on film, whether it be on digital, about, that fundamentals still apply. It's the old thing of you need to know the rules to understand how to break them. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If
I'm
you
all
don't know
about
how your gear works, then how can you push it?
Yeah, exactly. So really understanding the fundamentals of cinematography, I think, is really important. And then go crazy and do crazy stuff. I mean, geez, with film, I used to bake it in the oven and pour chemicals on it and do all sorts of weird stuff. But I did it from a place of knowledge, not a place of caution to the wind,
Yeah, exactly. That's a really interesting point, actually, and I'd love to hear what your take is on this. Is back in the day when it was film, and you were, and you're doing these music videos, and they're probably not underwater, but music videos are renowned for kind of pushing the boundaries of visually what can be done.
Yeah.
If you were trying to do some crazy effects or anything like that, what were you doing with the film to kind of push those things?
Well, like I said, we bake some film in the oven for, I've baked print in the oven, and actually,
what's that for?
Just to mess up the color of the image. Really,
okay.
You get these very weird effects happening in the footage, and it would be somewhat random, but you shoot tests. Obviously, you don't just go onto a job. Okay, give me all your film. I'm going to stick it in the oven. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. But you'd shoot tests and you'd show the director, and then that looks really cool. Let's go for it. I mean, we used to do silly things too. Before, when you had the old rank diamond, the rank Ursa diamond, and Y-fronts, and all those old telecine machines that you put the film up onto, they scanned with a CRT, not a CCD, as they did later on with like the Spirit. So you were able to do things like I'd put diffusion in the telecine gate. Like if you put it on the camera, maybe your highlights would bloom. You could put a diffusion in the telecine gate because you're coming off a negative. You'd actually make the blacks bloom.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And the telecine is basically how they were scanning the film.
They were scanning the film. So you'd actually color correct straight off the negative.
Right.
You know, Blackmagic still have a film like telecine machine, but it wasn't like a digital scan today where you're, like the ARRI scanners where you're actually digitizing and then you're color grading off that digitized image. You were actually color grading right off the negative and then putting it out to tape through the rank Ursa. And then along came the Spirit, which then became a CCD scanner, and then you couldn't do that stuff in the gate anymore, which was kind of a bummer.
Oh, so you lost all your DIY effects.
Yeah. I mean, I've even done things where we've color graded film and you've taken one roll and I actually rolled it out all around the facility and walked on it and stamped on it and scrubbed it, poured Coca-Cola on it, let it all dry out, run it through a cleaner. They have a machine that cleans all the dust off, and it's a cleaning machine. Run it through the cleaner and then run it back through the telecine and then retransferred it with all these scratches and messed up damage to the negative.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it to all the negative, but certainly certain things.
There's such a romanticism with doing that sort of thing because, I mean, today we could do that because there's probably a plug-in for it, and you click of a button, it's done, and you go, no, maybe not. But if you're doing it to the film and you're taking it, half an hour to roll it around the editing suite.
Yeah.
There is such I don't know.
It's organic.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a DIY aspect to it, you made those effects.
Yeah, you did. I mean, just the things like you could do, like, yes, we can go and do a bleach bypass look in DaVinci Resolve, but skip bleach or silver retention, whatever you call it, skip bleach, doing it actually on a negative has its own quality to it. It's just not the same. If you look at a movie like Seven, or David Fincher's Seven, that was all skip bleach. The quality of the way that film looked was really, really beautiful.
Absolutely.
That film. And that was, just to be clear, when you skip bleach, you're skip bleach on an intermediate, not on a print. You skip bleach on the intermediate print, not the negative, because the negative has the opposite effect, where everything gets kind of blown out and hot, as opposed to desaturated, crunchy blacks and so forth that would happen off a print. So
you would do a print from the negative and then skip bleach that.
And then you'd make your interpositive from that, and then you so on and so forth.
See, that's what I find interesting, and I have a fascination for the whole film industry, like going back to the 1800s of how they would, the special effects they would do, that didn't involve computers.
Yeah.
That stuff fascinates me.
It's really fun. I mean, even things like glass mats and doing the old glass mats and using rear screen projection and beam splitters and, there's so much cool techniques. And it's interesting. It's starting to come back in a way. I actually did a movie a couple of years ago where I rigged cameras on a vehicle and drove around downtown, and then all the interiors of all the vehicles were all done with rear projection screens.
Oh, right. So you rear projected the footage you'd already taken.
Yeah. So that you're driving down the street and over the shoulder, you have a large RP screen in front of you or to the side of you. Whatever you were doing, you were able to actually do it poor man's process on a stage using rear projection. Now with this company called Unreal Engine, have you familiar with that?
The Void. Yeah, what they're doing on The Mandalorian.
What they're doing on The Mandalorian, now it's modern technology doing, in a way, old school projection techniques. Obviously, it's a lot more advanced. The fact that these images, as you move the camera, track with you.
Yeah,
But
so you
if
get the
they,
parallax.
yeah, but you're kind of getting that same. All of now, instead of when you're on a green screen stage, actors trying to work in this environment, even shoot in this environment, is challenging because you don't get a real emotional connection to the work you're doing as a cinematographer.
Yeah.
Whereas now you're able to have these 3D real engine stages with these. Now you're immersed in the world again, and the actors are immersed in the world, and the actors like it too because now they're also able to connect with the world that they're performing in. And they were actually able to. Paul Cameron was able to work with Unreal Engine on the last season of Westworld to actually incorporate that on the film medium, which was quite amazing. They actually figured out how to make that also work in a film world, and it made a huge difference in a lot of the scenes in that film, especially
Wow.
when they're in these sort of vehicles flying through the city and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Bringing Unreal Engine was able to get the light to interact, like on all the reflections on the glass around these flying pods was real. It was actually it wasn't put on post. It was real interactive light and real interactive reflections that were captured in the moment in camera. And I think that is amazing. And that to me is one of the most exciting things happening right now in the film industry.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
really, really cool, and it's only going to get better, and it's really, really exciting. And even to the point now they can build. You can put on a set of VR headsets and build an entire environment on a location, and walk through it and build your sets.
Yeah,
Inside
exactly.
inside this world and preview everything. I mean, all this stuff to me is really, really exciting as a
And
cinematographer.
And it just makes so much more sense because instead of, making a green room where
Yeah,
you put your talent in,
yeah.
you're basically building the world around the talent, and everything that goes into that is already there. So, I mean, the VFX guys must be loving it too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it really does. It just elevates everything. And I think that's really, really exciting. And obviously, it's the way technology is evolving. It's going to evolve really fast, and it's going to be, it's a real game changer, I think.
Well, speaking of game changers, because we've also got motion capture, which
Yep.
is, kind of pushing forward as well. Have you done much work with motion capture stuff?
I've done a little bit of work with motion capture on motion capture stages, but I'm about to jump into something that's entirely new for me, which is mocap underwater. Now, due to and you understand this is the refraction of light through water. When light comes through water, then it hits the front of your dome port. Now we're coming into air. That causes refraction. You can't really use an optical medium to really capture mocap. You'll get false readings. Like if they wear a mocap suit, all
Right.
that mocap information, you're going to get false readings. So it's very, very difficult. Actually, James Cameron spent a year and a half developing a mocap system for the new Avatar films.
Yeah.
Because of that, to work underwater, it was very difficult. I believe they spent a great deal of money figuring it out, and they had many, 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 many motion capture cameras for that film.
Right.
And he's not telling us where they came from. It's kind of a big secret.
Right.
So what we're basically doing now, I'm putting 6 Blackmagic 12K Ursas underwater for this motion capture project. I can't talk about it exactly what it is, but it requires 6 cameras. There's going to be somebody in the water. We have 2 shooting straight up, 2 either side. They're going to be specific lens choices at a specific distance. They're going to all have to be rigged and hard mounted with quick release so we can replace them to exactly the same spot.
Yeah.
And then we have 3 more on the surface capturing water entry. It's quite challenging. Obviously, we've got to get 6 cameras in the water. All the time codes all have to be synced, so everything lines up.
Are they all tethered as well?
They're all tethered. Yeah, they're all tethered to the surface. They're not going to be tethered to each other, but you'll have press and remote for focus and run stop on the surface. We'll jam sync. They'll jam all the time codes. All the time codes match on the cameras. You'll close the housings up, drop them on the mounts, and you're ready to go. So, and then they're basically witness cameras capturing the underwater action, and then they're going to put that in the computer and do what they need to do on the back end. Again, I can't go into that too much.
No, that's totally fine.
Yeah. But, Hal from Hollywood Divers, Hal's been a friend of mine for 25 years. And he's worked on me. Yeah. He's worked as my underwater safety support guy for the last 20 years easily. So he's going to be involved, and they'll supply all their air and so on and so forth. And he'll help with some of the rigs and so forth. And the key grip soda pop, which I believe you know. Soda's great too. Soda's going to be my underwater key grip and build all the underwater rigs to support this stuff. So it's quite a fun, challenging project.
Yeah, that sounds great.
The Blackmagic Ursas have never been used in this situation, so we're actually, I have custom-made base plates to set the cameras in the right height. They all have D boxes on them to run the Preston system, but these cameras are so good that I think they're going to be. It's a really ideal situation for them, and for them to get really high-resolution images underwater. I think it's a kind of a no-brainer.
That's beautiful, and that's something that I would love to check back in with you once this has come out.
Yeah,
I'd love to see what the results are.
Yeah, it's once this, I'm free and clear of non-disclosure. I'll be happy to tell you all about it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Vance, this has been so cool. This is stuff that, definitely haven't touched on before, and your experience with film and underwater, and I don't think we even really got halfway through your kind of story.
Yeah. It's wasted a lot of years. Cool. It's trying to jam 35 years of film into an hour is kind of tough.
Yeah, totally. Well, we'll do a part 2 later on.
Yeah, no, it's really nice, Brett. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it a lot.
Thanks, man.
Okay, cheers.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, if you like the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. If you'd like to support the production of these episodes, you can purchase our very cool merchandise at theunderwaterpodcast.com. We've got branded coffee mugs, stickers, beer cozies, and posters featuring our amazing illustration and logo by Joe Hodino. If you'd like to connect with us or learn more about our guests, you can reach us at theunderwaterpodcast.com or on Instagram. We also have a Facebook group where you can discuss the episodes and even get your questions answered by the guests. There's a link to it in the show notes. You can learn more about my underwater photography workshops and mentoring at brettstanley.com or Brett S Photo on Instagram. The Underwater Podcast is presented and produced by me, Brett Stanley, and our music is Neo by Oh Boy. Keep creating, everyone. I'll see you in the water.